Get out, you're in the way of a pregnant woman. As she gently stroked her belly, Mira said so. Her face was so mean that I wanted to ask, don't pregnant women usually have a softer expression? I glanced at Mason. Sleep in the warehouse. Seeing Mason agree with Mira, my love for my husband also cooled. Still, there is a little bit of affection left, and I feel a bit down. Understood. In response to my answer, Mason happily took Myra's hand. Mira also looked at Mason with a dreamy look. The moment I saw the two of them, my downcast feelings disappeared and anger welled up from the bottom of my belly. I will leave by tomorrow. Yeah, oh, then stay somewhere outside today. This is already mine and Myra's house. I nodded slightly to the elated Mason and left the house. You can laugh while you can. As I left the house, I imagined what would be about to happen and smiled. My name is Elizabeth. I'm a 46-year-old housewife. I used to work hard before getting married, but that was more than 20 years ago. Now I do housework every day and enjoy drinking coffee slowly. I'm just an ordinary middle-aged lady. My hobby is investing. I've been doing it since before I got married, and recently I've been receiving large dividends and enjoying a fairly elegant life by going to luxurious hotel lunches and aesthetics. My husband Mason is 43 years old and a salesman for a major company. He's a bit, no, quite fat, and honestly, sometimes he smells strong, which is a drawback. But he's good at talking because he's on the front line as a salesman. Although he looks like a giant old man, I loved him and thought he might be better off being careful about his health and losing weight. But because I felt a cuteness like a mascot in him, I thought there was no need to force him to diet. Mason and I have one daughter. Our daughter Violet inherited Mason's facial features, and because she is thin, she is as cute as a model. Not only in appearance, but also in her studies, she always ranks first in her grade, and if she does sports, she is not only selected for tournaments and selections, but also has a kind and humble personality and works harder than anyone else. Both Mason and I adored Violet so much that we were often told by those around us that we were overprotective. Mason likes younger women, but he still chose me, who is older, and cherished his family. We had been living in a used condominium that we bought when Violet was born, but it was getting old and there was talk of raising the management fee recently. In the meantime, Violet decided to share a room near the university. At the same time, I was consulted by my relatives about inheriting a house that no one lived in anymore, so Mason and I decided to rebuild the house and move there. But I couldn't have predicted at the time that Mason, who had been doing well until then, would turn out like this because of it. The used condominium had 4 rooms including a guest room, but the new house has 2 rooms. Although it is smaller than before, considering our old age, we made it a single-story house and were able to live very comfortably. One of the 2 rooms was designed as a study and guest room so that if Violet ever came back, we could divide the guest room into Violet's room and a study room to make it 3 rooms in total. Since moving in, Mason has been late every night due to entertaining clients and has started to go out for some reason or another on his days off. Sleeping next to Mason, who comes home smelling of alcohol and cigarettes, was painful for me, who is sensitive to smells, even though we have separate beds. Therefore, although Mason and I had shared a bedroom together, I had been sleeping in the study room since coming to the new house. I decided to send greeting letters for moving in and sent them around. Since Mason is not familiar with such things, I acted on his behalf and sent letters to his relatives. On my side, since both my parents are deceased, I simply wrote to my maternal relatives and friends that I had moved. I don't have any contact with my paternal relatives. The reason for that was my sister Mira. Mira is my half-sister who is 14 years younger than me. When I was in my first year of junior high school, my mother passed away and Mira was born to my father's second wife, whom he remarried half a year later. My father had an accident with his second wife about 5 years after remarrying and never returned. At his funeral, I was told by my paternal relatives that my father and his second wife had been childhood friends and had been dating for a long time, and that everyone in the family had thought they would get married. And because my mother brought up a matchmaking proposal using her boss at the company, my father couldn't refuse and ended up marrying my mother, and the second wife had no choice but to give up on marriage. I was blamed for that. In my memory, my parents were always smiling, but behind the scenes, my father had a child with his second wife. That was more shocking to me than anything else. At the relative's house, Myra's favorite foods were always lined up on the dining table, her clothes were brand name items, she was given the largest room all to herself, and if she said where she wanted to go, she was taken there on the same day. On the other hand, I was forced to do everything from preparing meals to laundry and cleaning. If I worked part-time, all the money was taken away from me, and even in the small warehouse under the stairs where I lived, I had to bow down and prepare the bare minimum of supplies along with sarcasm. By the time Mira was in middle school, she had heard about her mother from her relatives and completely looked down on me. I worked multiple part-time jobs desperately and left home with that money. There was no way I could have good feelings towards Mira like that, so I didn't tell her that I got married or had a baby. A few weeks after moving in, while I was relaxing with a cup of coffee, the doorbell rang. When I responded, I heard a man's voice saying it was a delivery service and saw a person looking down on the intercom screen. Did Mason order some mail-order goods? I thought it was strange and opened the door. And then I gasped at the person who was there. Oh, Mira, why are you here? Long time no see, sis. I came. The person in front of me was indeed the person wearing a hat who appeared on the intercom screen. But it wasn't a delivery person or anything like that, it was my sister Mira. Mira slipped past me, who was frozen in surprise, and went into the living room on her own and sat down on the sofa. I hurriedly followed her and stood in front of her looking down. I've come back. Looking at Mira, who said so with a triumphant look on her face, I felt a chill run down my spine. You wouldn't come out if you knew it was me, would you? That's why I tried using a voice I recorded before. That's the worst thing to deceive. Wow. Scary. In response to my raised voice, Mira pretended to be scared. But it was clear that it was an act, and as proof, Myra's face was smiling. I came home to give birth. What? I responded coldly to Mira, who said something I didn't understand. Mira, with a smile on her face, started talking about her sudden visit this time. Because you never tell me where you are, and I got married, but my husband is always on business trips and it's boring, and when my belly gets bigger, it's hard to move, right? So everyone said I should ask my sister to take care of me. Go home. I don't intend to get involved with you and I don't take care of you. What? But I've already come here intending to have my sister take care of me, so it's impossible. I was irritated by Mira, who said such things without being ashamed. Get out. I don't want to see your face again. What are you making a fuss about? It can be heard outside. Mason. Surprised by Mason, who came home at an unusual time and struggling to explain, Mira stood up and went over to Mason. And then she entwined her arm with Mason's. Mason didn't shake off Mira and had a lewd look on his face. Oh, Mira is here. Welcome. Mason, my sister says mean things. I thought I wanted to live with Mason until the baby is born, but is that okay? Really? I'm happy. If Mira doesn't mind, you can stay forever. I was frozen with my mouth open at the conversation between Mason and Mira. Not only that, but Mira was sticking to Mason and they were at a distance like lovers. Mason, what do you mean? You're being mean to Mira. Why are you so harsh on her? Are you jealous of your cute little sister? I was at a loss for words at Mason's words. When we got married, I told Mason about the situation at home. And yet he says such things. You're not using your bed anyway. So it's no problem. Oh. Can I sleep in the same room as Mason? It seems like I can have a good dream if I sleep with Mira. Mason. Ignoring me like that, the two of them went to the bedroom with their arms entwined to put their luggage down. But when they didn't come back even after waiting for a few minutes, I had a bad feeling and went to peek into the bedroom. Then there were two people hugging each other. It's like a dream come true to be able to live with Mira. The baby is happy too. To be able to live with Papa. At Myra's words, I was speechless. Mason is Papa? What does that mean? Mason nodded happily while hugging Mira. Let's go on a date by leaving my baby to my sister. That's about all she's good for. As the two of them said that and overlapped their lips, I watched them through the gap in the door while shedding tears. From that day on, the two of them started treating me like a housemaid. While listening to what the two of them said, I started collecting evidence little by little. In the process, I learned even more surprising truths and I started thinking about divorce. One day, Mira, who was sitting on my favorite sofa, called me over. Then she opened her mouth with an attitude as if to say that she was the owner of the house. "Get out, you're in the way of a pregnant woman." As she gently stroked her belly, Mira said so. Her face was so mean that I wanted to ask, don't pregnant women usually have a softer expression? I glanced at Mason. Sleep in the warehouse. Seeing Mason agree with Mira, my love for my husband also cooled. Still, there is a little bit of affection left, and I feel a bit down. Understood. In response to my answer, Mason happily took Mira's hand. Mira also looked at Mason with a dreamy look. The moment I saw the two of them, my downcast feelings disappeared and anger welled up from the bottom of my belly. I will leave by tomorrow. Yeah, oh, then stay somewhere outside today. This is already mine and Myra's house. I nodded slightly to the elated Mason and left the house. You can laugh while you can. As I left the house, I imagined what would be about to happen and smiled. I stayed at a hotel as it was and planned for the future. I arranged for a moving company that would start working immediately tomorrow and decided to go home after going to the city hall first thing in the morning. That night, I was excited about what would happen from tomorrow and couldn't sleep easily, but thanks to letting go of various things, my heart was clear. The next day, as planned, I got a divorce form and headed home. Then the movers had already arrived and were looking at me with puzzled expressions. When I asked them, they said that when they arrived earlier, there were no people and there was only one cardboard box at the entrance. There really was only one small cardboard box placed at the entrance of the house, and there was a piece of paper stuck on it saying, "Feel free to take it." Inside were books and cosmetics that I had cherished carelessly thrown in, and some books were damaged because they were thrown in roughly. In addition, Mason's wedding ring was also inside, and I felt so angry that my head seemed to boil. When I opened the door of the house and went inside, there were crumpled sheets, pajamas, and underwear scattered around. I immediately understood what had happened here after I left home. Please take all these things. I closed the door of the bedroom and guided the movers to the study. Since Mason doesn't read books, the study is packed with books collected by Violet and me. Since I only had a few clothes in the first place, I decided to replace them this time. And when I entered the living room, there was a letter on the dining table. The letter said that Mason and others were going on a 5-night, 6-day prenatal trip overseas, that I should clean up during that time, that they would divorce immediately after returning home, etc. At such an utterly selfish attitude, I was dumbfounded. But since my plan became very easy to do thanks to that, I secretly thanked them in my heart. I had all my belongings moved by the movers and took off my wedding ring from my finger and left it in the kitchen. And then I left it there. I hesitated about where to live next, but bought a room that happened to be for sale near my child's university. The house with only one room is very comfortable and I enjoyed being alone for the first time in a long time. And on the day the two of them returned, my smartphone was ringing incessantly. I knew who it was without even looking at the screen. Without taking my eyes off the book I was reading, I answered the phone. Hello? Hey, what's going on here? Mason, without any greeting, quickly said that. His voice was terribly flustered. The reason was obvious, but I replied in a relaxed voice. What do you mean by this? Don't play dumb. Our house is gone. I couldn't help but laugh at Mason's words, and on the other side of the phone, Mason was going berserk. After a good laugh, I answered Mason. Why? It's my house, so if I'm not living there, I don't need it anymore. But Mira and I are living there. What about our stuff? Oh, don't worry. It's all safely stored in a self-storage. I'll send you the location and passcode in a message. Don't mess with me. Return to our house right now. You're funny. That land is in my name, and so is the house. Even the money to build it came from my investments, so I didn't get money from you. Oh. It seemed that Mason finally remembered when we built that house. Actually, when we were considering whether to renovate or rebuild, Mason said to me, I don't have any money right now, so I can't help. So if you're going to use your money, do whatever you want. He left everything to me. So I did everything from paperwork to payment by myself and built a house to my liking. But Mason, who had been wooed by Mira, seemed to have completely forgotten about it. Please. The baby who will be your niece or nephew is about to be born. Please prepare a house somehow. It's pitiful for Mira. My niece or nephew. If there's someone who can love the child of her husband's affair, I'd love to meet them. You. What are you saying? You thought I didn't notice? Mason seemed to think that he hadn't been noticed and completely changed his previously confident attitude. To such a Mason, I said further. I've been aware of your relationship since the day Mira barged into our house. And since that day, I've been collecting evidence. Evidence? The camera for the baby that Mira insisted on buying from me. You didn't notice it was working, did you? At my words, Mason let out a small what? The camera for the baby was the first thing Mira demanded when she moved in. She seemed to have already done her research and specified a high-end camera that costs thousands of dollars per unit. Of course, I refused at first, but I was yelled at by Mason and reluctantly bought it. However, all the camera settings were left to others, and neither Mason nor Mira ever touched the camera after buying it. So I secretly activated it and filmed everything in the bedroom. Indeed, it's worth the price. It was clearly visible even in a pitch-dark room. Both where they were sleeping in the same bed and what they were doing in bed. What? Peeping is a bad hobby. I just tested the performance of the camera. I think it's better than a man who cheats with his wife's sister. Oh. Mason seemed to be at a loss for words. I told him in a cheerful voice. Oh. I think the post is still there, so please check it. Post? Yes, it should have already arrived by now. While still on the phone, I could hear the sound of Mason checking the post. And the next moment, I heard Mason gasp. Oh, good. It looks like it's arrived. Registered mail. Well then, please take care of the payment. Hey. Mira's, too? Are you trying to cheat your little sister? What are you talking about? I'm claiming compensation for your betrayal. It doesn't matter if we're family or not. But. Enough with the excuses. Just contact my lawyer. Bye. Hey, wait. Elizabeth. I ignored Mason's voice and hung up the phone. Many calls came immediately after, but I ignored them. I had already signed up for a new smartphone in these 5 days, so my previous smartphone was only for evidence preservation. There would be no problem even if I left it alone. Mason had been calling for about an hour, but he either gave up or became quiet. And he seemed to have complained to the lawyer, as I received a report that the lawyer contacted me with a slightly tired voice. The next morning, my father's relatives contacted me on my new smartphone. I don't remember telling them my contact information, so they probably were told by Mira and were going to scold me. I reluctantly answered the phone while recording with my new smartphone. Hello? How could you kick out Mira, who is pregnant? What kind of woman are you? Apologize to Mira right now and give her a new home as compensation. Huh? Why do I have to apologize to a woman who cheated with my husband? I don't know what Mira said, but she should be the one apologizing. And Mira should also pay compensation. Oh, yeah, please tell Mira not to get involved with me anymore. Well, I don't think she has that kind of luxury anyway. The relative was babbling, but I ignored them and hung up the phone. I felt so relieved after letting out everything I had been holding back. I contacted my lawyer and asked him to call Mira and Mason. This revenge story won't end until I see their surprised faces. The meeting was held at the law firm. In front of me were Mira, who had a sulky expression, and Mason, who looked unhappy. It seemed that they had no intention of reflecting on their actions, no matter how much they were told. I didn't think my sister would do something like this. I'm shocked. If I knew she was such a greedy woman, I wouldn't have married her. I was deceived. I was beyond angry and just dumbfounded by Mira and Mason's selfishness at this point. I handed over the divorce papers in front of me and then another marriage registration form. It's compensation, but if you write this, I can reduce the amount. If you're going to reduce it just by writing this, I'll write as much as you want. Give it to me. Mason said that and took the pen from me and signed it. Mira also signed it with a grin. I put it in a file and smiled. Well then, I'll submit this to the city office. Did you forget? I'm already married. It won't be accepted even if you submit it. Oh, then don't worry. You're already single. What? Mira looked at me with a blank expression. I explained it to her in an easy-to-understand way. Yesterday, the divorce was decided in the divorce mediation. What's that? I don't know. Because you threw away your mail without checking it. There were many letters, including a summons letter. A message from your husband said that he would deny his relationship with his child now that the divorce has been finalized. No way. While Mira was stunned, Mason seemed happy. That's because he could marry Mira if he waited for the remarriage prohibition period for women. I smiled at Mason. You're having a hard time too. You have to raise a baby that's not even yours. What? The baby in her belly is mine. Oh, I didn't know that. Poor you. Myra's baby is apparently her lover's child. Lover. When Mason turned to Mira with momentum, Mira turned away with an embarrassed expression. Seeing that, Mason realized that what I said was true and turned pale. I think it's tough to pay compensation and raise someone else's child, but good luck from now on. Elizabeth. Let's start over. I was wrong. Violet is our child. As soon as Mason changed his mind, the door of the law firm opened vigorously and a woman walked in with a thud. As soon as Mason saw her, his face turned pale. Violet. You are the worst. You hurt my mother. I'm cutting ties with my father from now on. I'll live with my mother from now on. So disappear quickly, you idiot over there. Violet had never spoken such harsh words before, so Mason was frozen in shock. On the other hand, Mira was insulted and her face turned red as she trembled. Who are you calling an idiot? Besides your husband, you went after your sister's husband, and you even had an affair. What part of that isn't stupid? Are you crazy? What? It seemed that Mira couldn't say anything back to Violet's sharp tongue. I gave Mira the final blow. By the way, this person is stingy but doesn't save money. Be careful because he'll spoil young women. What? But what about that house and car? Oh, that? They're all mine. I got them from stock dividends. We used them as a couple, but we're strangers after the divorce. A man who earns a salary of around $3,000 can't ride in that car. $3,000. Even though it's a major company? It seems that Mira was also interested in money, and she froze with a white face. Mason also revealed that his salary was not high and looked down. Well, good luck with everything. I said that and left the place with Violet after asking the lawyer to handle the rest. That night, dinner with Violet was really fun and delicious. Afterwards, I submitted the divorce papers. Around the time when Myra's remarriage prohibition period ended, I also submitted Mason and Myra's marriage registration form. Mason apparently repeated his affair with Mira during work and went on cheating trips by embezzling travel expenses, which was discovered by the company and he was fired. I heard from someone that he is now living on a tight budget while working part-time jobs. Mira seems to be taking care of her child, but she has an intolerable personality to begin with, and she cries every day because she was even abandoned by her lover. The reason why Mira went after Mason was because she didn't like that I got married and had a child before her, and she wanted to destroy it. And because Mason worked for a famous company, Mira thought she could get money from her ex-husband and Mason by pretending that her lover's child was Mason's child, and I could take care of it. After this incident, it seems that even relatives have given up on her, so she reluctantly worked part-time jobs, but with her personality, she couldn't continue for long, so she lives in a small apartment with Mason and the baby. Violet is enjoying her university life. Actually, I was surprised when I found out that her roommate had a same-sex lover, but when I saw Violet looking happy, I thought it was okay. As for me, I'm still living leisurely on stock dividends as usual. Actually, after the divorce, I had more opportunities to contact Myra's ex-husband, and recently I've been invited to dinner often. Mira and her ex-husband were apparently introduced by a matchmaker, and they got married thanks to Myra's strong push. Even so, Mira wonders what she wasn't satisfied with about him. At first, he called me a sister-in-law, but now he calls me Beth as a nickname, and I don't hate it so much. I received an important message from him on my smartphone just now, so today I'm feeling uneasy even though I shouldn't expect anything. As I sit in front of my dresser putting on makeup, my face is blushing like a love-struck girl. My account should have $50,000 in it, but over the past 6 months, large sums of money have been withdrawn several times. I reported the suspicion of fraudulent withdrawals to the bank and decided to set up a trap to lure out the culprit after consulting with them. I knew my husband and sister-in-law were suspicious. The result was incredible. It's been 2 years since I got married to my husband, but I feel like I want to get divorced every day. I am not compatible with my in-laws. My in-laws are my father-in-law who is a company employee, my mother-in-law who is a part-time worker, and my sister-in-law and her husband who live with their 3 children within a 5-minute walk. By the way, my brother-in-law is currently working overseas alone. On the other hand, we are both full-time workers without children yet and live in an apartment about an hour's drive from my in-laws. Going back to when we first met each other's families, I thought I could get along well with them when I saw how my in-laws praised me, spoke ill of their son's self, and joked around while laughing together. So we got married. The wedding was satisfying for the invited guests. After that, we went on our honeymoon to Taiwan. There, I met an elderly Canadian man at breakfast. I lost this hotel guest benefit coupon and was going to buy souvenirs with it. I said, "We haven't used ours yet, and we have 2. Shall we give you one?" But for some reason, the old man's tone changed midway through our conversation and he tried to leave. Because my husband was staring at him with a stern face before I knew it. The old man left the restaurant. My husband shouted, "Why did you try to give that beggar something so easily?" I replied, "He didn't even ask for it, and we weren't going to use it anyway. He was just in trouble." Then he laughed unpleasantly and said, "There you go again, being a hero." I didn't mean it that way at all and was stunned by his words. I was preparing to hand over an envelope to that elderly gentleman before he checked out, but he wrote a blessings, in large letters on the envelope. I muttered to myself that it was too small and embarrassing for a human being. Although I was able to hand over the coupon to the front desk without any problems, I was in a cold war with him for a long time afterwards. I didn't want to divorce him there, but I was worried about what would happen next even on the plane ride back home. As soon as our newlywed life began, problems arose as expected. The problem was caused by my sister-in-law. At the time of our marriage, my sister-in-law was expecting twins in 3 months. For some reason, my husband asked me if it was okay to give her my contact information because she had something to consult with me about. I couldn't imagine what she wanted to talk about, so I put off answering. However, during that time, my husband told me that he had given her my contact information. The next day, my sister-in-law said to me, "I think we'll be relying on you for a lot of things from now on since we're family now. You know how hard it is to raise 3 children these days, don't you? If you're a full-time housewife like you are, you'll definitely be an asset." She then said, "For now, keep your schedule free for 1.5 years. When I asked her if she meant that I should help with child rearing, she laughed and said, "It's just something like an at-home job." She didn't listen to me after that. On that day, when I told my husband, "My sister is right. After all, you became a member of my family when we got married. She doesn't need to tell you in advance that she wants you to cooperate." I replied, if she doesn't have enough hands, can't she ask her mother or her husband's family for help? But my husband decided, it's useless to say that now. For the time being, it's your job to pick up and drop off the older child while my sister is hospitalized. However, it takes an hour by car from my home to my sister-in-law's house or my parents-in-law's house. It would take half a day to travel back and forth every day to match the children's nursery school and return home. Even if my sister-in-law and parents-in-law do not understand remote work, I cannot understand why my husband allows his sisters rampage. Furthermore, you are a hero of justice, so of course you will help your sister-in-law who is in trouble. He said with a grin. I'm tired of my husband's persistence. The next day, I went to my parents-in-law's house and decided to refuse everything about my sister-in-law. The next day, my sister-in-law asked me to pick up and drop off her nephew immediately. I can't accept it because I have work and distance, I said firmly. However, my parents-in-law said, don't you have any compassion? Don't you learn from your parents? That's outrageous. They got angry. To me, who was surprised. Father-in-law said, a wife is someone who serves her husband, her parents-in-law, and her sister-in-law and lives to serve her ancestors. Fact is stranger than fiction. My parents-in-law saw my behavior and seemed to think that I had finally realized my mistake. Mother-in-law said, that's fine. Please fulfill your duties as a wife properly. Including my husband's family, I was pressed to continue for a year and a half. However, if I do so, it will take more than 4 hours for 2 round trips, which will greatly affect my work. When I told my husband, he persuaded his in-laws and agreed to the condition that I would be free until 1 month after giving birth because he didn't want to lose his free money. So 1 month has passed, and now my sister-in-law brings 3 children to our house every weekend. Water is left running, air conditioning is on in all rooms, the refrigerator is empty, tissues are used up, and toilet paper always becomes a core. My precious metal products were gone. In addition, without permission from me, my sister-in-law rides alone in my car and goes out to play. If you want to borrow it, you should tell me. Moreover, the insurance for my car said that it cannot be used for compensation when someone other than me causes an accident, but she doesn't listen. Moreover, the car that my sister-in-law rode on it has already been scratched or dented. I sent an email to her husband who had exchanged it before because it would be bad if an accident occurred, but there was no response except for being read. Then my husband and sister-in-law started pushing their children onto me and started going out to play. Moreover, the play escalated gradually. During that time, I took care of 3 children who were not used to it while doing housework accumulated on weekdays. On one weekend too, my sister-in-law left the children entirely up to me and went out with my husband. On Monday morning, I went to the bank after my husband left for work and finally returned home. I was surprised to see that my account balance was supposed to have $50,000 in it, but it had only 3 digits. Upon closer inspection, I found that a large sum of money had been withdrawn several times over the past 6 months. I reported the suspicion of fraudulent withdrawals at the counter and, after consultation, decided to set up a trap to lure the culprit. The following weekend, my sister-in-law forced me to babysit her child as usual and went out with my husband. Moreover, my in-laws were also going on a one-night hot spring trip that day. You should study for future childcare. That's right. You're lucky you can learn for free. Lucky you. They said such things. The next day after my in-laws went to the hot spring, I received multiple calls from my sister-in-law. If I ignored them, messages would arrive one after another on email and other SNS. After a while, I reluctantly answered the phone and heard her loud voice. I can't withdraw money. What's going on? I said, I couldn't understand what you were talking about, and asked her what she meant by my bank account. She just kept cursing at me. Then my husband came out and shouted. This month was a bit tight because of some expenses. We didn't have enough credit available, so we decided to pay cash for this trip. But we can't withdraw any money now. I asked. First of all, whose bank account is it? It's mine, right? Why is your sister trying to use my money without permission? He became quiet when I asked him that. But then he suddenly shouted. That doesn't matter now. We can't pay for our stay at the inn like this. We don't even have money for the train back home. Then my in-laws started chiming in from behind. That's right. We'll talk about it when we get back home. Yes. Send some money to your son's account right away. That's a good idea. I was disgusted by this crazy family and said coldly. You heard me, right? Transfer about $2,000 to my account right now. But I say. I can't do it. I have to go to the police now. The other end of the phone goes silent again. And after a long silence. Police? Why? If someone withdraws money from my account without permission, it's normal for them to file a notice. I laughed and her sister-in-law seemed to have heard it. She said. Huh? You're my brother's wife, right? One's wife's stuff belongs to the family she married into, so it's okay, for me, my family, to use it. Don't you understand that? I said. I don't understand such incoherent logic. And now, my father-in-law shouted. There's no way stealing can happen between family members. My father-in-law started shouting. Of course it's not possible for theft to occur within a family. I asked him if he meant that theft between relatives is not punishable by law. He replied. Of course. If you know that, don't ask. I immediately responded. Sister-in-law and I are not relatives living together, so we are not exempt. My father-in-law was speechless. Then my husband asked me if I was planning on suing his sister. I told him that I would sue her as a victim and also consult about other items such as precious metals that my sister-in-law had taken without permission as theft victims. My sister-in-law interjected with whether there was evidence of such things. However, her flea market app account had already been identified and records of items stolen from me were posted there. Some of them even had photos of warranty certificates so they could be identified as mine immediately. She started crying when she heard this. Then my husband got angry and said, How dare you make my sister cry? Apologize to her. I replied. I am a champion of justice and cannot overlook wrongdoing. And I told him that I was preparing for divorce and that he should pay compensation and divide property properly. Divorce, oh, I see. You're a hypocrite. You cannot beg me to stay. I won't pay any compensation. He laughed. However, I have records and witnesses of how difficult it is to continue married life due to my husband and his family. I will expose everything in court, I said. What do you mean by witnesses? My husband shouted, and the person sitting in the passenger seat spoke into the mobile phone connected to the car's speaker. Sister-in-laws, it's me. Your sister's husband. As a member of the family, I have seen and heard all of your misdeeds. When I realized that money was being withdrawn from my account without my permission, the bank employee told me that if there is no record in the passbook, the possibility of the culprit being someone who can take out the cash card and know the PIN is high. In most cases like this, it's unfortunately done by family members. So I came up with a plan and sent a usage statement of about $3,000 transferred from another account to the account that was used without permission and left it in a conspicuous place in the house. At the same time, I changed the PIN from the previous one. By doing this, even if my sister-in-law tried to withdraw money with the previous PIN, the cash card would be locked and unusable after 3 failed attempts. I thought of this as a trap to ruin all members of my husband's family. When I found out that my bank account was being withdrawn without my permission, the banker told me that if there is no record in your page, the possibility of the culprit being someone who can take out the cash card and know the PIN is high. In most cases like this, it's unfortunately done by family members. So I came up with a plan and sent a usage statement of about $3,000 transferred from another account to the account that was used without permission and left it in a conspicuous place in the house. At the same time, I changed the PIN from the previous one. By doing this, even if my sister-in-law tried to withdraw money with the previous PIN, the cash card would be locked and unusable after 3 failed attempts. I thought of this as a trap to ruin all members of my husband's family. I also left an in pamphlet together with it and said to my sister-in-law. The hot spring view here is also great, but payment is cash only. It's rare these days, isn't it? My husband and she were grinning at that time, so I was laughing too. Then I sent a long message and photos to my sister-in-law's husband by email. I exposed one after another that my sister-in-law was leaving her children entirely up to me, not doing laundry or cleaning when I wasn't taking care of them, that her unsanitary house was where the children were staying, and that my parents-in-law were condoning it without reproaching her. Then he immediately replied that he had taken leave from work because of his family crisis and had been harboring various complaints and suspicions about his sister-in-law's handling of the children for some time. My sister-in-law said, "Don't make so much noise. I'll divorce you. But I won't give you custody." He had no choice but to remain silent. Then my sister-in-law's husband and I cooperated with each other and consulted lawyers respectively. He decided to claim compensation for misappropriated money and personal belongings, alimony, property division, while he decided to win custody of their children through divorce. When he calmly spoke about this over the phone, my sister-in-law was screaming on the other side of his smartphone while her husband said, "Do you think you can get away with this just like that?" I laughed at him and said, "I found something interesting when I investigated your family background. You left your children with me and went to nightclubs all night long." He was speechless. I thought it was terrible for siblings who have families to leave their children with someone else and stay up all night, but I never thought they were such stupid people. I told him that my luggage had already been moved out of our apartment and that since this apartment was treated as a company dormitory, the cleaning company would come in next week, so he should leave immediately. Then I handed it over to my sister-in-law's husband again. Sister-in-law's husband took the children to his parents' home and had no intention of letting her see them. Furthermore, the house where she lived was in her husband's name, so he would sell it urgently and told her to leave immediately. We blocked all communication channels. Although my sister-in-law and my husband, who wanted to avoid divorce as much as possible, said they wanted to come back right away, apparently they couldn't check out because they couldn't pay for their stay at the inn. In the end, they were suspected of eating and drinking without paying money for their stay at the inn and were reported to the police. After being severely scolded by them, they signed a memorandum promising to pay as soon as they returned home and managed to return home by taking ordinary trains. However, as promised, they left only divorce papers behind and apparently everyone was exhausted after seeing my sister-in-law's house and apartment become empty shells. After that, thanks to a capable lawyer, I received a lump sum payment of compensation, and both my sister-in-law's husband and I divorced. It seems that my sister-in-law's husband also won custody of their children safely. On the other hand, my former parents-in-law were begged by my former husband and sister-in-law to let go of their family home and use that money to repay compensation and misappropriated money. Of course, that alone was not enough, so both my former sister-in-law and former husband borrowed money and became guarantors. Furthermore, since the bills for the nightclubs they attended were quite high, both of them are working day and night to pay off their debts. As for me, I'm tired of marriage for a while. I want to focus on taking care of myself for now, including the time I wasted dealing with my ex-husband.